Hi, everyone. It's Andrew Krug here with Carlos Kidman, who's one of our workshop instructors at OQConf, October 5th through the 7th. Glad to have you here. Carlos, your workshop is on data-driven API testing. Can you briefly explain what your workshop is covering?
Yeah, so we're going to start by essentially like designing APIs because I feel like you got to become one with the API first. And if you want to leverage them and use them in different types of testing, like API or UI testing. So once we kind of go through that, then we should know them a lot better. And then we'll move into actual API testing and then using them in UI testing. I feel like I kind of repeated myself there, but boom, that's what it's all about.
That's what it's all about. That's all the good stuff there, because a lot of companies are relying upon APIs now, and you might as well leverage them in the rest of your tests. Make your life easier.
Well, what I wanted was I wanted to kind of design an API first, because I think a lot of people think about API testing from like, I have already existing endpoints and now I need to test them. And that's becoming less and less true. Now I want to create a new service and I want to test it correctly from the get-go. And so how can we start almost like in BDD form? How can we collaborate and understand what the services are supposed to do, so then we can start coming up with scenarios and kind of designing it in that way. So kind of moving from BDD into TDD and then actually creating these endpoints and testing them. So
that's great. That's great, because that's definitely where like you should be writing your test essentially right when developers are writing the actual features and whatnot. And typically the API is first before they actually build a UI for it. So yeah, that's absolutely fantastic to be thinking about it in that process, in that format as well. Why did you decide on this topic?
Because it's hot.
It's hot. It's popping.
It's still hot.
It's still hot. Still hot. That's great.
No, more serious answer. I mean, it is hot, but in the world of like microservices and macroservices, you want to lower things down and be able to build and test these things as quickly as possible, right? We want fast feedback loops. And so the lower in the pyramid we can move stuff, you achieve that, right? You achieve those faster feedback loops. And one thing that I think people don't really recognize is that if you work on the API layer first, before the UI layer, you realize that there's a lot you don't need to test anymore at the UI layer. You also realize that some of the UI tests that you need to then write are really easy to write because you kind of set everything up for the API testing first. So I wanted to show people like, hey, there's actually a good flow that you can take. Instead of starting with UI and going down, if you start down and go up, you are able to kind of just naturally achieve that pyramid. It kind of just happens.
Yep. You get to fall into good practices and patterns, sort of by accident, but it's planned. So it's a planned accident. It's a happy accident at that point.
A happy accident, Bob Ross.
Happy accident, everybody. Yeah. Happy accidents, little clouds. That's what API cars, little clouds, happy accidents.
Yep. Happy little services.
I didn't think we were going to pull in Bob Ross into this, but we have. What are some common mistakes you see that teams are currently doing?
Starting from the UI and going down. It's probably one of the biggest problems. And I say one of the biggest because it's whenever I start at a new place or I consult somewhere, it's almost always like that, where they have a ton of UI test cases and just UI automation, just tons of them. And a pipeline takes hours, maybe days, just depends. Oh, we'll just run it nightly, and then we'll run it from 11 p.m. to 6 a.m. and having a 7 or 8 hour runtime's okay. And I was like, you guys don't, like, you don't know what it's like to be a developer then, because the developer doesn't want to wait 7 hours to get feedback. By that time, I'm doing something else. So it's really frustrating to look at a pipeline, even for 15 minutes. If I look at a pipeline for 15 minutes and just watch it run, do that 5 times in a day, I'm not going to like that 15-minute pipeline anymore. So if it's anything more than 15 minutes, dang, no way, no thank you. So I think it's one of the biggest problems that people face is they start with the UI, and then go down, and they have these massive pipelines. Yeah, it's just bad. I also see people that will learn how to do UI testing first, like UI automation first. And arguably, UI automation is probably one of the harder types of testing to do, in like compared to the other ones.
Yep.
API testing is actually relatively easy. UI testing's got a lot more to it. So many more dependencies, synchronizations, and things you have to set up and control or whatnot. That's harder in my opinion.
Mm-hmm.
And so if you start with the API and unit testing, you see how just it's a lot easier, and you can test quite a bit at those layers.
Oh yeah, yeah. That's one of the key points I wanted to like bring out during this conference is the fact that test everything where you can at the best spot it needs to be tested at. So testing everything at the UI layer, yeah, you could do it, but is it wise to spend much time there or not? Probably
And
not.
I'm hoping that my workshop can kind of help with that. And that's why I wanted to start from the very, very beginning of you're on this team. We're creating this brand new service.
Get started now with it.
How do you approach it? And instead of saying, all right, let's build the UI first. Well, we don't have a UI, so you can't do that. So now what do you do? And I think that story and that progression that we're going to go through, I think will very nicely illustrate how we can approach it from the other direction, and then move our way up to the UI.
Yep, and be involved with development at the beginning where testers should be, and not at the end of development when it's like, well, if you did a few things differently, we could have tested this a lot better, and you increase the testability of the application after the fact. But when it's done beforehand, it's much easier to do, and everybody is happier from the get-go.
Preach.
Excellent. What are some of the key takeaways from your workshop? But I feel like you've kind of already answered that.
Yeah. So the key takeaways would be, I guess, recapped. It is how you can use your human-centric critical thinking, your curiosity, your exploratory just skills, use them to define what and why you're going to test certain things, and use those skills to get everyone else an understanding as well, right? Because the business is going to be looking at it from a certain perspective. Developers are already looking at how do I do this thing, and you're kind of trying to bridge this gap between them. And it just when you do that, oh my gosh, like the amount of confidence you have going into the project before the sprint even starts is already amazing. So hopefully you get to see that automation has many human-centric qualities in it, right? There's a lot of human-centric skill sets and things that you have to do. You will take notes. You have to critically think, what things do we care about? Before even thinking about code, how do we do these things? What things do we care about? How do we prioritize it? Why are we doing this instead? How much testing is enough at this point? How do we know that this feature is done? What does that look like for us? And then from there, converting that into now these different scenarios and examples that we can then automate. That's really the big key takeaway that I want people to see is how can we use those human-centric skill sets to then drive our automation and see it at the API layer.
Excellent. Those are absolutely great takeaways to have for a workshop. Now, the fun one I always find fun to answer. What is one thing you wish you knew when you first started out?
I wish I knew that there was like communities out there, to be honest. Because when I first started out, it was by myself. I would say self-driven learning, because I learned from certain people that I kind of just followed once I found that like, hey, this person does automation in C#. But I didn't know there was a community. I didn't know that there were people that existed that liked testing as much as I did. And so I took my approach to it was I was mentored by a lot of developers. And so I got into programming very quickly, and not really the quality and testing aspect of it until a little further in my career. So I wish that I would have known about communities and the networking and everything beforehand, because I felt like I was in a silo my first year or two.
Oh yeah, I can relate to that. I was a silo of one, occasionally two, depends if he was actually in the office or not. So great, thank you so much for your time. You will learn a lot more from his workshop. If you register now and sign up, Carlos says yes. Carlos has approved this message. It's great.
Do it. Just do it.
Just do it. Do it. Sign up. It'll be great. There's a lot of networking opportunities you get within the conference itself, and it'll be a blast to have everybody in there. So again, Carlos, thanks for having you, and we'll chat with you later.
Thank you. See you there, everyone.